Among those who responded to the call, Chief Dan Daly. Curious thing about Dan, he had to commandeer a mail truck to get to Ground Zero at the World Trade Center 13 years ago today. Chief Dan Daly checks in with us now via Skype from New York City. Chief, we thank you for your time. And the obvious question is, what do you remember at this time of day 13 years ago?
Well, it was a good morning, first of all, and thank you for honoring those who lost their lives on 9/11. Yeah, it was a crystal clear day, unlike what it is here this morning. I fly a small airplane, so I remember going out and looking up and saying, wow, what a great day to take a flight. And then a friend called and said, Dan, did you see what happened? And I said, no, what happened? He said, turn on the TV. I said, what channel? He said, it doesn't matter. So right away, I knew something serious had happened. I walked in and I saw the planes hitting the building, and I instantly knew it was going to be a very, very bad day for New York and a bad day for humanity.
Now, Mr. Daly, I first of all want to thank you for your heroism. And I want to know, as a first responder on the scene, what were your first thoughts? What did you think when you saw this?
Well, when we finally got down to Ground Zero, the sun was totally blocked out from the sky. Everything was covered with a thick white dust, and it had this surrealistic air to it, like after a snowfall, that little kind of cushion to the sound. Mm-hmm. People were running around covered with blood. And I remember one of the chiefs I knew well walks out of this smoke and his haze, and he walks up to me, and he looks at me and says, Father Mike is dead. And then he, without any further words, he just kept walking. That was Father Michael Judge, our very popular and very spiritual man. And then someone else came up and said, Steve Belson is gone. Steve Belson was my oldest and closest friend. So that litany of bad news wouldn't stop that day nor for many days to come.
Dan, we take this day obviously to remember 9/11, but I would imagine for you it is a daily occurrence, losing friends, losing co-workers, the loss of such a magnitude. How do you deal with it in the here and now?
Well, I lost about a dozen really close friends and about 50 people that I knew. And part of our duty at Ground Zero, obviously, was finding the remains of people. And it was a very emotionally wrenching job. So after that, you have to do something with that emotion and with that energy. And if it goes in a negative direction, you know, you're going to spiral out of control. So I decided to reach out and talk to young people about some of the good things that happened down at Ground Zero, some of the spirituality of the teamwork of coming together, so that they would have something to grab onto other than this is a heinous world with heinous people in it.
You know, Dan, I want to expand a little bit on that, because one of your main missions is you really are saying hope and inspiration and paying it forward, if you will. And you talked to school children that weren't even alive when this happened. So why is it important that they understand about this day and what it was like to be there?
Well, young people, just growing up, it's very difficult in these times. But then knowing that there's this kind of violence and tragedy in our world, I think they need to know what really happened at Ground Zero, about people coming together, about that at the end of the day, the true legacy of Ground Zero wasn't what heinous people could destroy. It's look what we can build by coming together. All the priests and rabbis that came down to Ground Zero, the doctors, the college students that all helped. It really became a very special place to work. And that to me is the message, that we made a difference at Ground Zero in a very, very tragic situation. And thusly, in our lives, each one of us can make a little difference that reverberates outward. And I want young people to find their voice, and I want them to find their power early in life, so that they make right decisions about where they're going.
Dan, you mentioned earlier the passing of Father Mike, and those of us who were not there but who see the video, there's video of Father Mike going in, and then sadly there are pictures of his remains being brought out. We look at the video and we see your colleagues in their gear about to rush up the stairs.
incredible.
and a lot of them didn't come back. Are you able to watch those videos, or do you stay away from that?
No, I don't stay away from anything on 9/11 because in a weird kind of way, it keeps me centered. It makes me aware of what can happen when we don't pay attention. Edmund Burke says, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. And if the reminder that I give myself is a little painful and a little disquieting, on the other hand, it moves me to do things that I might not normally be stimulated to do.
So tell me, when you're faced with a situation like this, I mean, 13 years later, I find it difficult to even still watch these videos. What propels first responders like yourself to actually go into these buildings? And, you know, when your natural reaction is to run away, you guys run in. How do you do it?
Well, there's an incredible amount of adrenaline that comes into your system. And I think anyone in the emergency services, they have as their pinnacle action in life being able to save another human being. So when the opportunity arises, so does that adrenaline within ourselves. And that was one of the unique things about arriving at Ground Zero. We stood at the base of this massive mountain, 80 feet high, 16 acres wide, knowing there could be 50,000 people in there. And here we are, facing this twisted labyrinth of huge steel girders with only small hand tools. And it was so disabling because we knew we really couldn't do much, but there was much to be done. And that was one of the things that I can remember, standing there saying, oh my God, what can we possibly do?
Dan, your training obviously takes over, but now 13 years later, I would imagine amidst all of that, you were undergoing sensory overload.
Yes.
Was there a period of time, I guess basically a mental decompression, where different events that happened that day came back to you? Is there any one thing, whether it's commandeering the mail truck to get there or hearing about your friends, you've talked about it, is there any one thing that typifies the experience that you carry today, an instance that you could share with us right now?
Well, I mean, there is one outstanding moment that is also terrifying, and I'll never forget it. That we found a woman, appeared to be a woman's hand, coming out of the dirt, and we had to. We weren't sure what that was attached to, and we had to secure that hand. So I had to actually sever that hand with a shovel, so that at least we would have something to bring back to the morgue, so that the family would have something. We were afraid that in the movement of the steel, it would get lost. And I just having to do that, for any human being having to do that kind of work with a shovel and what goes on in your mind, obviously I'll never forget that. And many of the people who had to do stuff like that down there will never forget it. It's just, where do we put it in our mind? Where do we let it cause energy in a positive or negative direction? And to me, whatever little it is that I can do, if it moves the world and I owe it away from something like this happening again, then it'll be worthwhile.
You know, Dan, we as Americans use the word hero, and a lot of times we throw it about lightly, but this is really the true definition. You and your colleagues, it's just unbelievable, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, I would just like to say, none of us that work down there would ever consider ourselves anything close to heroes. Our heroes are the people that walked into that building, and you've seen their looks on their faces on some of the videos. They walked up, and just like Father Mike had that look on his face, they knew what was going to happen. They had an inner sense, it looks like. Those are my heroes.
We can't add anything more, Dan. We just want to thank you for an intensely intimate, personal recollection of this day, your colleagues, and what happened September 11th, 2001. Chief Michael Daly, you have our thanks. We appreciate so much your insight, and your sharing of those intensely personal experiences here today.
God bless all of you, and let's truly never forget and keep in mind those who lost their lives, so that we'll be empowered to find our voice and make a difference in our world. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Chief. As we leave you for a few minutes, we take a look back to Ground Zero, where Dan Daly and others worked so valiantly 13 years ago today. This special edition of America's Forum continues.